When the pH is 7, then it's a case where the sample is neither acid nor base. But less than 7, it's an acid, we say. More than 7, it's a base all the way.
Welcome to the past HSC exam question videos. We're going to do in this video, we're going to cover this exam question, which comes from the acidic oxides chapter of the acidic environment module. What I'll do in a second, I'll read the actual question. Once I read the question, you get about 5 seconds to pause the video. Once you've paused the video, attempt the question, and when you're ready, press play and I'll go over the actual answer itself. So the question is here is, there has been an increase in the concentration of the oxides of nitrogen in the atmosphere as a result of combustion. Assess both the evidence to support the statement and the need to monitor these oxides. And that's worth 5 marks. So when you're ready, press pause, attempt the question, and then press play when you've done so. Welcome back. Alright, so this question, what it says that there's an increase in the oxides of nitrogen. Remember, that was nitrogen oxide and nitrogen dioxide. And this is a statement that has been given. And the actual question says, assess both the evidence to support the statement and the need to monitor these changes. So we need to talk about the evidence to support the statement and why we need to monitor these changes, what these oxides actually do. The first part is, we'll just talk about what evidence there is. There's been an increase. We'll do that now. So what I wrote first is, there's both a quantitative and qualitative evidence that the oxides of nitrogen have increased in the 20th century as a result of the Industrial Revolution and the increase in motor vehicle use. Now, quantitative means kind of numbers, and qualitative is descriptive, so something that is just not to do with numbers itself. So now this quantitative is measurements, qualitative is descriptive. And the statement itself, the first statement just says that there has been an increase in concentration, so the statement was correct, the first statement that was made. And this was most likely due to the Industrial Revolution and an increase in motor vehicle uses. And we will discuss obviously the quantitative and the qualitative evidences of that. I go through actually first what I mentioned next is how these NO and NO2s actually get produced. It's nitrogen oxide and nitrogen dioxide. The main source of nitrogen oxides are motor vehicles and to a lesser degree coal power plants. The high temperatures of engine combustions will result in nitrogen in the air reacting with oxygen to produce nitrogen oxides. So the heat in the engines make nitrogen be reacted with oxygen to produce nitrogen oxides. And I also included these chemical equations. So here's our nitrogen in the air reacting with oxygen. That happens because it's high temperatures. That produces nitrogen monoxide. And then nitrogen monoxide can react with more air, oxygen particles, to produce nitrogen dioxide. And these equations are important because, especially for a 5-mark question, it's always handy to give some equations. Now so far I've just mentioned, yes, there's been an increase in the pollution of these different oxides and also where they can come from. Now I'll go through the actual evidence. So what I wrote is, the quantitative evidence is the most reliable evidence and includes direct atmospheric concentration measurements and measurements derived from the ice samples. So these were the 2 ways we have the quantitative evidence. Remember, this direct atmospheric concentration measurement was really accurate, but it only came around the technology that we need to make this happen has only been around for a few decades. So these ice samples let us compare concentrations of more than 100 years ago, whereas this direct concentration measurements have only been around for a shorter time. But they're most reliable. So the quantitative, the direct measurements, the measurements are the most reliable source. But we also have the qualitative ones, and then we'll go over those as well. So the less reliable, but nonetheless important evidence includes the increased rate of respiratory problems. These are the qualitative ones. Smog, so photochemical smog in polluted areas, and increased rate of acid rain. So these are the qualitative evidences. Yeah, the reason why that's not so reliable is because, however, these occurrences could be the result of other oxides within the air. So for example, this could also be because of sulfur oxides. So just because there's chemical smog or acid rain doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be nitrogen oxides in the air. It could also have been sulfur oxides, for example, so sulfur dioxide. But yeah, it's evidence that we use to also say, yeah, there's probably been an increase in pollution because it's been more acid rain and more smog in cities that use lots of cars and all that kind of stuff. But these were our quantitative and qualitative evidence. Now we've done the first part. We've supported the evidence, that statement. So it's given the evidence that support that statement. What we'll do now is we'll talk about why we need to actually monitor. What's the reason why we monitor these changes? So what I wrote is oxides need to be monitored as they can cause serious damage to organisms as any living thing, and their environment. And increased levels of these oxides needs to produce countermeasures. I don't know what I wrote here. And increased levels of these oxides needs to result in a countermeasure. So basically what I wanted to write is if our levels of nitrogen oxides go up, there needs to be some kind of countermeasure to make sure we can bring it back down. So there needs to be steps that come into place to bring that back down to normal, to reduce our emissions. So yeah, ignore the grammar of that sentence, but the idea was just that if we have too much, we need to be able to monitor that, because if we know that it's too much, we can bring it back down again. And it's important because it can cause damage to the environment and to organisms. And then I also wrote nitrogen oxides can cause respiratory problems. So these are some of the problems they can cause, which is particularly problematic for individuals suffering from asthma. Respiratory problems are breathing problems. Also, it can also irritate the eye as well. Nitrogen oxides can also react with water in the atmosphere to produce acid rain. Acid rain damages ancient buildings and can kill marine life and damage leaves of plants. So that's one reason why we need to make sure there's not enough nitrogen oxides in the air, because that can cause these different problems. And then what I wrote here is just the equation where we have nitrogen dioxide reacting with water to produce different nitric and nitrous acid, which are more or less acid rain. So you have a 5-mark question. You get a couple marks for just mention that the support of the statement, so that you have a statement, the initial statement, there's been an increase in the concentration, and you've said, yep, there has been an increase, and you explained why. That gets your mark. Then you have given the evidence to support, so both the qualitative and the quantitative evidence. So now at the moment you've got 3 out of 5, and then you've given the reason why we need to monitor as well. So the fact that it's problematic, that it's damaging, and if we monitor it, then we can bring it back down because we know it's too high. So these were the reasons why we need to monitor. And that's overall 5 marks out of 5. And where did this question come from? It came from these different syllabus dot points. So for example, describe using equations examples of chemical reactions that release sulfur dioxide and the oxides of nitrogen. That's why I could use those equations, because it's actually saying we should know the equations in this dot point. Also, we've got this dot point, assess the evidence that indicates increase in atmospheric concentrations of oxides of nitrogen and sulfur dioxide. Again, here this is what the question was, assess both the evidence. So this is what this was, the evidence. Assess the evidence comes from this dot point. And this dot point talks about why we need to monitor. This is analyze information from secondary sources to summarize the industrial origins of sulfur dioxide and oxides of nitrogen, and evaluate reasons for concern about the release in the environment. So this was the second part of that question, talk about reasons why we need to monitor these changes. That comes from that dot point. This question has like 2 main dot points, which are this one and this one, that this question comes from. I hope that was useful.
Thank you for watching.